I want to greet everybody that's going to join us here. We have with us Micah Beckwith, and he is an amazing dude. I mean, he is the pastor of Life Church, but you know what? I'm going to let Micah tell a little bit about who Micah is. Micah, why don't you do that for us?
Thank you. Well, like Vicky said, I'm a pastor. At Noblesville and at a church called Life Church. We have 4 campuses around the central Indiana area, and it's been a pleasure and a joy doing the work of the ministry. But I've actually, before that, I was at a church called Northview Church, and then before that, I was at a church called White River Christian Church. And so I've been in the world of ministry for now 17, 18 years, and I have a business background as well, so I'm kind of an entrepreneur at heart, and but I also love training up the next generation. I'm a teacher. I teach constitutional literacy class to a high school in Carmel, Indiana, and then I've been in youth ministry for a number of those years in ministry, and seeing the lies that are being pushed to the next generation just boils my blood. I don't think there's really anything that I can really even use to describe kind of how mad it makes me sometimes when I see the lies that the pits of hell have been pushing on to the children of this culture. It really is it's really ticked me off. And so I go in really just with the truth of God's word and say, no, who are you in God's world? Like what's the identity God is speaking over you? Let's reject the lies of the devil. Let's take on the identity of a good God, and let's walk in that. And so really, I mean, it's just kind of everything I do is surrounded around the idea of what is truth? How do you know truth? And then, like I said earlier, if you know the truth will set you free, according to what the scriptures say. And I just want to see people set free, both in the physical sense, but also in the spiritual sense as well.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and you can feel when you're around somebody who's promoting truth in scripture and living the gospel values in their life, because they surround themselves with people that promote truth too.
Yeah.
And you're living that authentic life, Micah, and you do that civically, and you do that in your Christian life with being a pastor. Folks, you may not know this, but this guy right here is going to be running for lieutenant governor. And and we were lucky enough to have this interview with him amidst his incredibly busy schedule. So we're going to talk about a couple of things here today. I'm really upset about what's going on in Carmel. There may be some hope on the way, though, that I'm going to talk about. But I want to spend a little bit of time here with Micah talking about what called him to decide that he wanted to run for lieutenant governor.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So I've seen over the years of just being, again, in ministry, I've also been very conscious of the fact that God's people were getting more and more silent in the world of civic engagement, of stewarding our nation, politically speaking. And you would hear Christians, especially in the church world, pastors, they would say, well, we shouldn't be political. We shouldn't be political. And so you kind of take that for, just on face value, and you say, okay, yeah, okay, Christians shouldn't be political. Well, when you start diving into that statement, you find that is very, very wrong, and it's not God's intention for his people. And even Jesus Christ himself was, by his very nature, is a political entity. He's the political arm of the Trinity. It says, Isaiah 9:6 says, and the government shall be on his shoulders. Well, governing is the idea of policies, setting policies that are of right living within a society. And the act of creating policy it's called politics. That's what we call it in America, as politics. It's creating policy. Who decides what's morally right and wrong in a nation? And if the church, God's mouthpiece in the world, if we remain silent, how do we expect that society will do what's morally right and acceptable in the eyes of God? It won't. And even Jesus says in scripture, as in the days of Noah, so it will be in the days of the return of the Son of Man. And I think that's what we're seeing in America. We're seeing people will do what's right in their own eyes, as in the days of Noah. There was no moral boundaries. We are seeing things so wicked being pushed in our culture, and we're forced to accept it.
Right.
under the guise of tolerance and saying, well, you have to be tolerant of everything. Well, where's the line? I always ask people, where's the line? And they don't know. I mean, people who want to push all kinds of immorality, they don't really know where the line is. They just think for them, it's okay to do this. But what happens when that goes too far? Well, they don't have an answer for that,
That's
because
right.
everyone can do what's right in their own eyes. And so
We call that moral relativism. Everybody
right.
has their own compass for what they believe is moral.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
And so I just saw that coming a few years ago, where the church was just not doing the job that God had called us to do, to steward America. So I said, okay, well, I'll start jumping into the civic engagement realm. And I became a delegate in 2016. I've been a delegate every 2 years since in Indiana, and I've been engaged in politics and ran for Congress in 2020, and didn't win, but did really well out of a field of 15. I took third place, which I think shocked a lot of people in a congressional race. And then the lieutenant governor's race was kind of unique, because I felt like the Lord began to show me that the people don't have a check and balance within the executive branch in Indiana. And we don't typically allow people to choose who the lieutenant governor is. Mm-hmm. It's just, it's the governor gets to appoint somebody. Mm-hmm. Now, he doesn't have the authority to do that, but he tells all the delegates in the state convention who he wants, and the delegates just go along, and they never actually get to voice their own opinion on who they believe would be best in that office. And so what I'm doing now is kind of breaking the status quo, breaking the mold, if you will, and I'm running to give the delegates a voice at the state convention to say, no, don't pick who you're told to pick who you believe would be the best champion of conservative faith and family values that would be a check and balance within the executive branch, so that we never see a governor do what, unfortunately, our governor in Indiana, Eric Holcomb, has done. He shut down churches, but left abortion clinics open. He fought against things like constitutional carry, which gives everybody the right to just live out their Second Amendment freedoms. He fought against the women's sports bill, which would keep biological men from competing against.
He vetoed it.
He vetoed it. So I'm thinking to myself, where is the check and balance within the executive branch? Yes. And it should have been the voice of the delegates in that lieutenant governor's office, but I'm running to give that voice back to the delegates. And again, listen, I'll be the biggest supporter of a governor as long as that governor is doing what is constitutionally he or she is allowed to do, and as long as that governor is doing what he or she knows to be right within the bounds of faith and family morality, conservative values. As long as that's happening, then I'll be the biggest team player. But the moment a governor steps out of line of those two basic fundamental belief systems, the constitutional values and faith and family values, then I'll be right there to call them back into the right boundaries and say, no, you can't go this direction. So that's why I'm running for lieutenant governor, and it's going really well. And
good for you.
It's
all about check and balance.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what our systems are all about. And when they get out of kilter, this is what we have running around. It's total mania. When we put all that power in one person's hands. So I totally agree with you. And anyway, delegates should not let another person tell them how they should be voting.
Yeah.
Since when in our society do we let another person tell us how we should vote?
Yeah.
Since when do we do that? So how does somebody become a delegate, Micah?
Yeah, so that's great. So in Indiana, the way that people run for delegate, every county has a certain amount of delegates based on population. So I'm in Hamilton County, and we have, I believe it's 116 delegates in Hamilton County. Okay. But I was just up in Wells County, which is southwest of Fort Wayne, and they have 12 delegates in their county. So it varies on delegate spots. But in January of 2024, what you're going to do, you're going to go to your courthouse, and you're going to go into the county clerk's office and say, I'd like to run for delegate in the Republican Party. You're going to fill out a little one-page form, just your information. And then in May of 2024, you'll be on the ballot for your delegate district. Okay. And each delegate district will have, depending on the number of delegates within your county, the delegate district could have a couple people running for, or it could have a couple spots open, or it could have as many as 14, 15, 16 spots open. In some places, probably even like Marion County, 20 to 25 spots available for people to fill. So I'm telling you that to say, when I first ran for delegate in 2016, there were 9 delegate spots available in my delegate district. I think only 12 people ran for. So I just had to beat just a couple people, right, to get into contention to be a delegate. And I think I ended up taking third or fourth place. I didn't do any campaigning. There was no money I spent. It was literally just, a few friends went out and voted for me, and I became a delegate. And then delegates get to go down to the state convention a month later in June of 2024. And then you vote on some really important things within the Republican Party. You vote on your party platform to make sure that it's a platform that really truly represents Republican values. It's basically the platform defines who we are as a party.
Sure.
And if the platform ever gets out of sync or out of whack with good values, it's because the delegates don't have good values. So you need good people being delegates to hold the Republican Party accountable to real Republican principles. And then you vote on 5 statewide races for the nominee. You vote on the nominee for 5 statewide races. Normally, people think there's a primary. This is the primary for these 5 statewide races, and those races are Secretary of State, State Auditor, or now we call it the State Comptroller. That was just changed this year. Then we have State Treasurer, and then we have Attorney General, and then the 5th office is the Lieutenant Governor. Now, for the first 4 that I listed, we always have races for those. It's very common to see multiple people vying for Attorney General or multiple people vying for State Treasurer or vice versa. So, but for some reason, the Lieutenant Governor has been taken away from the delegates. Although we still have the authority to vote, we don't get the choice. And so I'm just saying, hey, the Lieutenant Governor should be in that mix as well. Delegates should be able to decide who the Lieutenant Governor is on that ballot. And again, this is the primary process for those offices. So if you win that at the convention, then you go up against the Democrat candidate for that office in November. And so it's a little bit of it's a little bit different than the typical primary process that most people are used to in Indiana, but that's how we've done it constitutionally speaking in Indiana when it comes to those 5 statewide offices. And so it's a really fun process. You should be a delegate. It's only a 1-day commitment. Once you're done in June,
I'm gonna sign up.
Yep. So
I had heard that the GOP leader, for instance, for Hamilton County, will look at who's applied and say, look, were you really a Republican? Did you really vote in those primaries in past elections? Is that true?
Yeah, so that's the one way that the Republican Party can gatekeep people from coming into the party. There has to be some process of people to say, because if we don't have a process to say you're a Republican and you're not, then any AOC could move into Indiana and sign up to be a Republican, and then she could infiltrate the party and turn the party totally away from Republican principles.
I hate to say it, but my next door neighbor, we do not want that person coming.
Yeah, right.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right. So one of the ways, and probably the main way that party chairman within the party of a county can kick you off the ballot is if you have not voted in 2 Republican primaries. Okay. So it's really important in May of 2024, and then even like May every year, no matter when, every year there's going to be a primary. Go and vote in a primary, and when you pull a Republican ballot at the primary, that's giving you a little bit of a cred to say I'm a Republican. Now again, that's not a catch-all. There are still people, the Democrats do this in Indiana all the time. They specifically vote in Republican primaries so that they can infiltrate the party. They'll vote Democrat in the general because again, remember the primary is just picking your starting lineup. It's not really the game. The game is the general in November, and nobody knows how you vote in the general. You can walk in and you can vote, you can say I'm a Republican, you can vote Democrat all day long. But in the primary, you have to pull a Republican ballot or you have to pull a Democrat ballot or an independent. You can pull an independent ballot, but there's not usually anyone on that ballot. So anyway, all that to say, that's how the chairman keep people out of the party who really aren't Republicans. But then it's also backfired. I've known really good conservative, constitutional-minded people, who have gotten kicked out of the Republican Party because they just didn't have a primary voting record. And
I advised them. I said, make sure you vote. This last primary so that you can be one of those delegates.
Exactly.
Well, all right, folks. So you get this action point. If you voted in the last couple of primaries, you need to make sure that when do they need to file by?
And so the filing deadline, I think, is February 6th. I think is
Okay.
so it opens beginning of January,
Okay.
and then the deadline is like the first week in February. So just sometime in January,
Okay.
go and file to run for delegate in your county, and that's if
Yeah.
you do it in January of 2024, you'll be fine.
Yeah, and the thing is that I can attest to with Micah, this man stands up for for parental rights. I've seen him do this. I have actually seen this man in action. I've seen him in the courthouse fighting for parental rights. The thing is, we as not just US citizens, but Indiana citizens have to reclaim that the family, which is the bedrock of this nation, by the way, has to make sure that they care for their children.
Mm-hmm.
And this man just wants to make sure that parents are able to take care of their kids. Okay?
Right. Yeah.
They have a voice in taking care of their kids, and that other people don't squeeze them out of that process.
Yeah.
And this man ensures that that happens.
Well, yeah, thank you, Vicki. I mean, I really appreciate you saying that, and that's my heart. I mean, God gave children to the family. He didn't give children to the government. And so, if the government ever thinks that they have more authority than the parent, I'm going to be their biggest opponent on that. I'm going to fight them tooth and nail. I'm never going to let the government take away from parents what God gave them. And in the same way, I'm never going to let the government take away rights that God has given you. I mean, that's why I'm a big, advocate for original intent, for the founders, how they wrote out the Constitution. We have to defend it that way because God gave you and me rights. He didn't give government rights. He gave you and me rights. The government is only instituted by men in order to uphold those rights that God gave. And so that's why I fight. I fight because I see overreaching, overbearing governments stepping in and destroying the rights of people, but also destroying the rights of families and parents. And if you want a strong nation, guess what? A strong nation is built on strong families. And if the family collapses and if parents lose their rights, we will not be a strong nation. We have got to step up and defend what our founders have envisioned, what the generations that have gone before us, what they fought for. I mean, the greatest generation, the World War II generation, they fought and died for those rights. And now we're just flippantly as Americans, we just think that freedom's always been. We think that freedom is free, and freedom is not free. Freedom, we have to pay a heavy price tag for freedom. And our generation needs to do the same.
It's so brilliant what you're saying. My newsletter was about this that I issued today, and our pastor, just his 4th of July homily was all about this, and that freedom has responsibility, and we have to fight for that freedom. And that means going and being a delegate. That means showing up and defending those freedoms, folks. So, and Micah, thankfully, we have this beautiful person here who's willing to put himself on the line, because there are arrows, coming at him, I'm sure. I want to shift attention for a moment, Micah, because, I don't know if you're following what happened, the Sunday, June 25th, the Lord's Day. Sue Finkham, who's running for mayor in Carmel, she got up on a stage and endorsed this Pride Festival, where then drag queens came out before dark and proceeded to, entertain people. They had little children that were there slipping dollar bills to them. And it was the most disgusting display of hypersexualization of families and children, frankly, that I've ever seen. I had some guys, because I was out of town doing some undercover work, and took the photos for me for my newsletter. And because you'd think that the news would pick this up and expose this for what it was. No news would pick this up. But it's in my newsletter. If anybody wants to go to our website under the resource tab, you can find the newsletter, how they're hiding behind children to have these events. But, I don't know what your view is of, politicians endorsing these kind of events and really tossing aside traditional family values. Maybe that's too much for you to get into with where you're running right now, but if you'd have any comment on it.
Yeah, no, 100%. No, I'll dive into any issue. I don't really care about, the political fallout. I'm just going to tell you what the truth is, and
Yeah, okay.
I don't really worry about the outcome.
Yeah,
I'm just, let truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. You just have to set it free and
sure.
defend itself, right? So going back to that event that you were talking about, so Carmel is really the bedrock of this battle between, I would say, just morality. This battle for morality within, at least in Indiana. I see a lot of people from Chicago and California moving into central Indiana, and they're going to
Right.
places like Carmel or Brownsburg or Fishers and places like that. When Indiana was built, it became a very strong nation, or a strong state. It was built on conservative values, and now people are moving in from other parts of the nation, and they're saying, "Oh, Indiana's a great place to raise family. Got good schools. The economy's strong." Well, they're bringing in their politics that are destroying those pillars of our society within our state here, and they think they can have all the blessings of what comes with morality without having the actual morality, right? And so that's what we're fighting against. And so to your point, Vicky, yeah, what we saw in Carmel there, at the Pride Fest was just an egregious display of where we're heading as a culture. And then, it's not just the fact that people were doing these drag queen events for kids. I mean, and people will say, well, it wasn't for kids, but no, kids were there. They actually marketed it as family friendly drag queen story hour. I don't know if they call it story hour, but it was a drag queen event marketed for the family. And now you're being vilified if you speak out against that. So not only are people who want to say, hey, we should uphold a decency and standard of morality in our culture, not only are those people speaking out, but they're being vilified from the side that wants to engage in this nonsense. And then you have Republican politicians who are supporting, endorsing, and sponsoring these events. So you had Sue Finkham, who's the mayoral candidate for the Republicans, but you also had Matthew Snyder and Adam Hassan, who they're city councilors. They took money and they sponsored the Pride Festival where this was going. They're Republicans, supposedly.
Yes.
And that's the problem I have is I get the Democrats are going to push this stuff all day long. The Democrats have always been the party of immorality. The Democrats were the party of slavery. They wanted slavery to maintain its status within America. If it wasn't for the first Republican president of Abraham Lincoln coming in with the party of freedom and liberty, we would still probably be fighting, the fact that slavery is immoral. But we had Republican principles set people free, but they were based on God's values and God's idea of what's right and wrong. And now you have Republicans who have now seeped over to accepting Democrat values of immorality, like these drag shows for children. And that's the problem that I see within the Republican Party, not only in Indiana, but also around the nation, where we don't really know what defines us as Republicans anymore, because it's just, well, whatever anyone wants to believe is right. We just have to get along. Let's be tolerant of everything. And I always say, again, where's the line?
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, what's next?
And what is next? I mean, if they are willing, if Sue Finkham, Matthew Snyder, Adam Anson are willing to toss aside the moral fiber of the Republican platform, what else would they do when they succumb to that kind of pressure from the Twitter feeds?
Yeah.
I had a conversation with Sue because, I'm willing to try to have that conversation to say, are you willing to issue a public apology? Because maybe after she saw the pictures, she's willing to say, I erred, but she isn't willing to even do that, So this is supposedly a Christian woman who's not willing in self-reflection to ponder what she's done and say, my bad. Yeah. So, okay, so fine. You know what? She's not the right candidate, but I just met with this guy today who's going to be the write-in candidate for Carmel. Thank God. His name's Darren Johnson, and, I don't know if you know him, but he is fabulous. This man is led by his faith. He literally quit his job. He was an engineer, then went into stock and real estate investing. He quit his job to run this race. He initially thought, that Fred Glenn was going to be the guy. And when Fred did not win, he said, somebody has to step up for conservative values and conservative fiscal values too, by the way. But when I asked him about the Pride Festival, he said, there is no way I would be there. So I'm saying, okay, he's strong fiscally conservative. There's no way he'd be there. He's led by his faith. I don't know what your thoughts on this are.
Yeah, no, I know Darren really well. Darren actually goes to my church.
Okay,
and so,
right.
yeah, so I've had these conversations with Darren for a while, and Darren was one of the people that couldn't get on a Republican ballot because he just he didn't have a voting record in the primary. He would vote in the general, but he didn't normally vote in the primary. He's really a lot more of a Republican than he is anything else. But because he couldn't get on the ballot, he said, well, I'm going to consider running as an independent. And so that's what he's doing. He tried to get on the ballot as an independent so he wouldn't have to be a write-in, but he came up, he got 100, or I think he needed 812 signatures, I think is what he was telling me, to be placed on the ballot. I think he got 700 he got almost 900, but they threw out about 100 signatures. So he was just upper 700s. So but to get 770, however many signatures he got was also a big feat. So he's been out there hitting the ground, knocking on doors, talking to voters within Carmel. I think it's going to be an uphill battle for him to win this mayoral race, but he could be a spoiler for Sue Finkam, because to your point, there are people in Carmel all over the place that have said, we cannot allow a Republican who wants to endorse drag shows for kids to become the mayor of our city. And yes, Miles Nelson, like he endorsed it. He supports that kind of stuff without a doubt, but he's the Democrat. We all know Democrats do that. Like nobody has to guess that Democrats are the party against parents' values. They're the party of abortion. They want to destroy life. They're the party of sexual immorality, like drag shows for kids. Like, at least he's being honest when he said, like, yeah, right. Yeah. So I think that's where Darren could really come in and say, hey, I'm going to give you an option as a write-in, he could siphon quite a few votes away from Sue. Unfortunately, I wish Carmel just had a Republican who adhered to social and conservative values. I think Sue wants to play the fiscal card. Like, I'm a fiscal conservative, which I don't even know how you do that in Carmel. Like, Carmel's really not been the beacon of fiscal conservatism for many years under Jim Brainerd's leadership and the council's leadership.
That's right.
That's going to be a hard one to sell to conservatives like myself, who say, okay, that's really not anything to brag about. And now you're endorsing all of this other stuff over here, this lifestyle crap that is being shoved down our throats left and right everywhere we go, whether it's the schools or the public libraries or corporate America. Why should we vote for you? And I think that's where Darren's message is resonating with a lot of people in Carmel.
Yeah, very, very well said, as usual, Micah. Thank you. Yeah. Any last words?
Well, I think, to your point, Vicki, it takes all of us. We got to step up, and if we want to see liberty and freedom and a decent and moral society based on what God says is right and wrong, then we all need to step up and do our job. We can't be the silent majority anymore. No. We've heard that term for many years. Well, there's a silent majority. That to me is a really it's a really offensive term. We shouldn't be silent at all. Why in the world is the majority afraid to speak? And if you don't speak, then you will never declare truth. And if truth isn't declared, then you won't have freedom. You have to open your mouth. You have to get out there. You have to speak truth in order for people to be set free. And so you don't have the luxury of sitting back and being silent anymore. You got to get out. You have to steward this nation, or else we won't have the same freedoms and liberties that our children and children's children have had, and or that our parents had given us. Our children and children's children will not have those same freedoms and liberties that we've been blessed with. So, all that to say, I would love to chat with anyone who has any questions about my race for lieutenant governor. You can go to micahbeckwith.com to learn more. And ultimately, it takes every single person to get off the bench and to get into the game if we want to steward this amazing nation, this beautiful republic that God has given us.
Well, folks, here you've heard it. This is our hope right here. And if you want to restore sanity to this state, if you want to restore liberty and accountability, this is your man. Thank you very much, Micah. I am so grateful to you.
Thank you, Vicki. It's been an
All right.
honor to be with you today, and keep
All
up the great work. I appreciate your voice.
All right. Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye.